Imagine waking up to discover that your greatest rival suddenly controls half a continent because of one choice you made under pressure. Imagine realizing that you traded the future for a fistful of coins. Imagine being Napoleon Bonaparte, the most feared commander in Europe, and realizing you just sold away the land that would create the world's next superpower. This is the story of the greatest irreversible mistake in real estate history, a decision so large that its consequences still echo 2 centuries later. And it all began with desperation, ambition, and one breathtaking miscalculation. Napoleon Bonaparte did not rise from the chaos of the French Revolution just to make small decisions. Everything he touched was grand, his victories, his reforms, his vision for France, even his mistakes. And among all of them, nothing compares to the Louisiana Purchase of 1803. A moment when he traded away 828,000 square miles of North American land for quick cash, unaware that he was handing the United States the foundation of its future greatness. To understand why this moment was so catastrophic for Napoleon, we must travel back to a world that was unstable, unfamiliar, and full of shifting power. The year is around 1800. Europe has barely recovered from revolution. Monarchies tremble. Ideas are spreading like wildfire. And in the middle of it all stands Napoleon, a young general who has seized control of France and intends to reshape the world. Across the Atlantic, the United States is a young and fragile nation, less than 30 years old, stretched along the Atlantic coast and unsure of its future. Vast regions of the continent are unmapped by Europeans. The interior is controlled by native nations with rich cultures, long histories, and complex alliances. The land is enormous, wild, and full of potential. At the center of this vastness lies the Louisiana Territory, a region so large that even European scholars struggle to imagine its full size. It stretched from the Gulf of Mexico into the northern plains, from the Mississippi River to the distant shadow of the Rocky Mountains. It included prairies that seemed endless, forests that swallowed the horizon, and rivers that ran like veins through the heart of North America. Control of this region meant control of the continent's future. For much of the 18th century, this land belonged to Spain, but Spain was weakening, exhausted by centuries of war and colonial management. Napoleon saw an opportunity to revive French power overseas. He dreamed of a Caribbean empire that would pour wealth into France: sugar, coffee, trade, agriculture. With control of the French Caribbean, he believed he could finance his growing military ambitions in Europe. Louisiana, in his mind, was to be the backbone of that dream. It would supply food and materials for the Caribbean colonies. It would anchor French power in the New World. In 1800, through the secret treaty of San Ildefonso, Spain quietly handed Louisiana back to France. Napoleon had gained one of the largest territorial possessions in the world. On paper, it was a brilliant strategic move, but fate had other plans. The first blow to Napoleon's New World Empire came not from Europe, but from the Caribbean island of Saint-Domingue, known today as Haiti. There, enslaved people had risen in a massive revolution. They demanded freedom, dignity, and independence. Under leaders like Toussaint Louverture and later Jean-Jacques Dessalines, they fought with unshakable determination. Their revolution would become the most successful slave uprising in history. Napoleon, determined to crush the rebellion, sent tens of thousands of French soldiers across the ocean. It was one of the largest military expeditions ever launched to the Americas. But the French troops were not prepared for the fierce resistance they faced. They were not prepared for the climate, for the terrain, or for the diseases that ravaged their camps. Yellow fever tore through the French army, killing soldiers faster than battles could. Defeat followed defeat. The expedition collapsed. Haiti eventually claimed its independence, shattering Napoleon's dream of a Caribbean empire. Without Haiti, Louisiana lost much of its strategic value. It was no longer a support base for the Caribbean. It was no longer a source of agricultural supplies. And to make matters worse, France was on the brink of war with Britain. Napoleon knew one thing with absolute certainty. If war broke out, Britain could send its navy to seize Louisiana immediately. France had almost no naval presence in the region. Defending it would be impossible. At the same time, Napoleon's treasury was strained. Years of European conflict had drained resources. He needed money to build a fleet capable of challenging British naval dominance. He needed ships. He needed cannons. He needed crews. And to get them, he needed cash. Across the Atlantic, President Thomas Jefferson was watching all of this with intense concern. The United States depended on the Mississippi River for its trade. Farmers and merchants in the West needed access to the port of New Orleans to ship their goods. If France closed the port, the American economy could face disaster. Jefferson sent envoys to France with simple instructions. Offer to buy New Orleans and the small surrounding area, nothing more. The Americans believed it might take months or even years to negotiate. They had no idea that Napoleon was about to make a decision that would change the course of history. In a stunning turn of events, Napoleon offered to sell not just New Orleans, but the entire Louisiana Territory. Everything. Every forest, river, prairie, and mountain within that enormous expanse. The American diplomats were shocked. They had no authority to purchase such a massive region, but they also understood that an opportunity like this might never come again. After quick deliberation, they agreed. The price was $15 million. Spread over the size of the territory, it amounted to around 3 cents per acre. Even at the time, people recognized how unbelievably cheap the deal was. The United States had just acquired enough land to double its size overnight. Napoleon received the money he desperately needed. He directed the funds to the construction of a new French fleet, convinced that he could challenge Britain on the seas. But history was not on his side. Only 2 years after he sold Louisiana, the combined French and Spanish fleets met the British at the Battle of Trafalgar. The British Navy crushed them completely. The destruction was total. Napoleon lost the fleet that he had used the Louisiana funds to build. And with that defeat, any chance of invading Britain died. He had sold a continent to pay for a fleet that sank before it could achieve anything. The irony was staggering. The true cost of Napoleon's decision would not be fully understood for decades. The land he had sold was unimaginably rich in resources. It contained fertile soil that would feed millions. It held forests that provided lumber for generations. It contained rivers that became major trade routes. It held minerals, coal, and eventually oil. And it offered strategic depth that no enemy could easily penetrate. The Louisiana Purchase set the stage for the westward expansion of the United States. It encouraged exploration. It inspired settlement. It drove the idea that the nation was destined to grow from coast to coast. Soon after the purchase, President Jefferson sent Meriwether Lewis and William Clark on an expedition to explore the new territory. Their journey lasted more than 2 years and revealed the vastness and richness of the land. They mapped rivers, documented wildlife, established connections with Native American nations, and returned with a vision of a continent full of promise. But this expansion came with profound consequences. The native nations who had lived in these regions for thousands of years faced increasing pressure as settlers pushed west. Conflicts arose. Treaties were signed, broken, rewritten, and broken again. Entire cultures faced displacement. The Louisiana Purchase became a turning point that reshaped the lives of countless indigenous peoples whose histories are often forgotten in the triumphal story of American expansion. The Purchase also intensified the debate over slavery. As new states were carved from the territory, politicians clashed over whether these states would allow slavery or not. These conflicts laid the groundwork for tensions that would eventually erupt into the American Civil War. In this sense, the Louisiana Purchase was not just a bargain. It was a catalyst for some of the most painful chapters in American history. Still, from a global perspective, the Purchase was a monumental shift in power. It ensured that the United States would one day dominate the North American continent. It eliminated France as a major presence in the region. It weakened British colonial ambitions on the western frontier. It gave the United States room to grow, to industrialize, and to eventually become a global powerhouse. Napoleon, even at the height of his power, may not have fully understood the magnitude of what he had done. He saw the sale as a temporary financial maneuver. But history revealed it as one of the greatest strategic missteps any leader has ever made. He gave away land that held the economic future of a rising nation. He gained money that vanished into a destroyed fleet. And he opened the door for the United States to begin its rise to world dominance. By the time Napoleon faced final defeat at Waterloo in 1815, the consequences of his decision were already visible. The Mississippi River had become a major highway of trade. American settlers were moving west. New territories were forming. And the young nation he had once dismissed was growing stronger every year. There is a quiet sadness in the irony. Napoleon, the master strategist, misjudged the value of land in the direction of global power. He excelled at war but faltered in economics. His mind was shaped by European battlefields, not continental possibilities. He never imagined that the United States would become a giant, and yet, through his own decision, he helped create that giant. The Louisiana Purchase stands today as a testament to how history can pivot on a single moment. A moment of pressure, a moment of fear, a moment of short-term thinking. No armies clashed over the land, no cannons fired, no fortresses fell. Instead, pens scratched paper, signatures were placed on a treaty, and the fate of two nations was forever changed. The sale remains one of the greatest bargains ever made. A continent traded for a fleeting military dream, a temporary advantage exchanged for a permanent shift in global power. The United States gained the heart of its future strength. Napoleon gained almost nothing. This transaction is more than a historical curiosity. It is a reminder that even the greatest leaders can make colossal mistakes. It shows that the value of land, opportunity, and long-term vision can outweigh even the most formidable armies. And it proves that sometimes the most powerful events in history happen not in the chaos of war, but in the quiet of negotiation rooms where decisions made in minutes can shape centuries. Napoleon wanted money to build a fleet. What he did instead was fund the rise of the United States. His decision gave America the space, the resources, and the confidence to expand. And once the nation realized what it had acquired, it moved quickly to secure its new destiny. Today, the Louisiana Purchase remains the ultimate symbol of a decision that grew beyond its creator, a choice that slipped out of Napoleon's control and into the hands of history, a reminder that even the most brilliant minds cannot always see the future. Napoleon sold the heart of a continent, and the United States used it to build the mightiest nation on earth. I'm John, and this is the Cinematic History Tales channel. Subscribe now to stay ahead of the curve, because when the history books are written, you'll want to be among the few who saw it coming.